Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Paratalk. This episode, I've got another guest. Actually, a fellow, I won't say a fellow podcaster, but someone who I've followed on YouTube for quite a while. And as soon as I mention their name, I think a lot of people out there are going to go, oh yes, I know who that is. So without further ado, let me introduce the man himself, Mr. Curious World.
Hello, Reeves. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for having me.
That's quite all right. It's quite a thing. I mean, I got to admit, bit of a fanboy. Do like your channel.
Oh, really?
Can you tell me a little bit about how Curious World, how it came about?
How it started?
Yeah.
Well, back in 2015, I was a big fan of, there's a few channels that I was into. Top Fives was one of them. Rob Dyke was another one. And there were a couple of others, but Top Fives and Rob Dyke were the main ones. For the longest time, I was watching their videos and thought, oh, this, I could do this. Maybe, possibly I could do this. I don't know. But I kept putting it off because I really didn't like the sound of my own voice. And I didn't feel comfortable telling stories because it was something I'd never done before. I'd never done any kind of voiceover or anything like that. So it took a few months for me to get my head around it. And in the end, I thought, oh, what the hell? You know, I can do it. I can do it. I can be anonymous. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, nothing lost. So, yeah, I just got a microphone, the only microphone I knew at the time because a friend of mine was a musician and he used a Zoom H4n Pro.
Mm-hmm.
From talking to him, that was the only thing that I knew that worked quite well. So I went and bought one of those and I went from there. iMovie, obviously free software. Yeah, so that's how I started.
Well, I have to say that your videos are, they're very well done and you seem to put a lot of effort into them because they are just the right length and they, research-wise, you do hit all the markers because they are very engaging. Was there a plan when you started out? Did you think I'm going to do a YouTube channel? I'm going to research ghost, the paranormal. Obviously, you've got to be interested in that to have the motivation to do it. Was that your first idea?
Well, the first video I ever did was based on murder rates, crime rates around the world in the most crime-ridden cities. That was my first that was what my first video was about. And I think when I started, I just wanted to make videos that I was interested in, things that interested me. I wasn't worried about anybody else because I didn't have any subscribers, obviously. I didn't have any viewers as far as I knew. So I just thought, all right, I'm just going to do some videos that I like, that things that I'm interested in. And they were all very different because I think I did a one, like I say, about the crime rates from around the world. And then I did one on the Darwin Awards. And then I did one on the death of Sonny Liston, the boxer. And then I did one on haunted hotels. And it was all very eclectic. Mm-hmm. It was all just things that I was interested in. And then obviously, as time goes on, and you do begin to gain a little bit of an audience, which I didn't for about a year, then you start to realise what people like from their comments and obviously the videos that are more popular. I'm not really I didn't want to make videos for other people. I did want to make them for myself. At the same time, I didn't want to be too eclectic because I didn't want to alienate people. So I did decide I'm going to stick to true crime and I'm going to stick to the paranormal. And that's how I continued from about my sixth or seventh video.
So, okay. So my next question would be regarding the paranormal. You set up a YouTube, you make some videos. It kind of works. You feel that you've got a path you're going down. Where do you get your stories from? Have you got a kind of, do you read books and then think, well, that'll make a good video, or I could retell that, or is it stuff that you've picked up over the years? Because clearly you have an interest in the paranormal. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But what point did the Curious World YouTube channel, did it say, well, this now is going to be about the supernatural and all things weird?
Really, going back to the first point, I get it. My stories from everywhere. It's like I might be, say, I'll be reading a book. Say I'm reading a true crime book, and it might be a book about a really well-known case like Jack the Ripper or something. And I won't cover something like that because it's been done many, many times before, and I don't want to cover old ground, and I don't think that I could ever bring anything new to that table anyway, considering Jack the Ripper. But there might be a subplot in that story that they just mention in passing. And I think, hang on, what was that? What was that person's name? How were they? What did they do?
Yeah.
And then I'll take that, and for example, I mean, it's not the best example, but there was the Thames Torso murders of 1888.
Yeah.
Now that's quite reasonably well covered. I may cover it in the future because it hasn't been. There's a lot more to say about it because I read a book about it. I can't remember the author's name. The author's from the Isle of Wight. I can't remember his name now. But we did speak once after I read the book because I was so impressed by it. So I actually contacted the guy. But there was mention of another torso case in 1966. And I thought, really, that they were like parallel stories. I mean, obviously, like 70 years apart. I looked into that, realised that nobody had mentioned it on YouTube, and I looked into the British archive, the newspaper archive, and I pulled out as many stories as I could, and I made a video about that. But I only knew about it because I read about the 1888 torso murders. Otherwise, I would never have known it even happened, because a lot of these stories are completely forgotten. They're lost to history, which is a real shame. Another one that I was really happy that I found, because again, it was one of those stories that you could really dramatize it quite well and you could make a film out of it, but yet again, it's just another story that was lost to history. It was when I did the Dark Tales from Wisconsin case. I never thought for a second that I would be able to take a Wisconsin story from the American Midwest and link it to Jack the Ripper and the London police force. But it was just one of those subplot things. I thought, wow, this is great. Yeah, it was about a Wisconsin man who committed a murder, and to escape, he travelled back to Switzerland because that's where he was from. But he went via Ireland. He was intercepted in Ireland, and then he was taken to London. And I just thought that was a really interesting link between the two, because I could hark back to, and it was only, I think, 5 or 6 weeks after the body of Mary Kelly was found.
It's bizarre.
So in amongst all of this Jack the Ripper mania that was happening, you had this little story all the way from Wisconsin that just made its way into the London police force, and it was mentioned a couple of times in newspapers at the time, but it was forgotten just as quickly. And it's just those little snippets of history that I like to bring back, because otherwise I don't want to blow my own, I don't want to make it sound like I'm doing a great service. But I think if I hadn't mentioned it, maybe it may never have been mentioned again.
It's interesting that you kind of connect the dots in that way by looking at a story from a slightly skewered angle and looking at the areas, the blind sides that people don't tend to research or look into. Because when we look at these stories, for example, Jack the Ripper being, one of the most famous tales there are, and whodunit or, murder, mystery. But when we look at it for what it is, it's been covered so many times and the story's been told over and over and over that you take it for granted that, well, it's the guy and he went around London and he just stabbed people and that was it. But when you start to sort of dissect it and look at all these intricate links, that possibilities, then you can start to unstitch the story and kind of look at it from a slightly different angle, and that's interesting, because those are the angles that never get looked at, because people don't, either for one, they don't want to do the work, and it's like, it's too much work, I'm not doing that, or they don't want to do the research and reading books, looking at history. Oh no, I can't be doing that. Just want to tell the story. They're two things that take a lot of time and a lot of effort, and that leads me on to my next question: is you do a lot of research into the videos that you make. Do you plan to say, well, I need to go there and research this or research that? Or is it something that kind of grow as you do an episode? Do you find that you need to go to certain places, research, maybe a small village somewhere, and you think, well, I need to go there and experience what this place is like, just so I can kind of put myself into the place of the characters that I'm going to be talking about? Is that how far do you go when you research a story?
if the place that I'm talking about is reasonably close to me, I will drive there. I will just go there because there's no excuse. I think it's a real shame if I was to do a story about something that happened in Yeovil or Bristol and I didn't bother going there myself to film
Yeah.
some of the locations, especially if it's a modern day tale, because the locations won't have changed that much and the visuals will make a lot more sense. It's a little bit different, I think, if you're talking about something that happened hundreds of years ago, because if you're
Yeah.
filming a modern city, it's very difficult to use that footage as a setting for something that happened to 100 years ago. But
Mm.
yeah, I do tend to travel to places if they're not too far away. I will do.
So my flip side question to that is that when you do go to locations, because we, just to let the listeners know, we are kind of reasonably close. We live in the
Yeah.
same southwest bubble. So we both live in the same area of folklore, legends and mystery and
Mm.
ghost tales, and we're both kind of in that kind of area. So there's a lot of legends, there's a lot of stories and a lot of folk tales to do with the southwest. I love the books that you buy in the secondhand bookshop that were self-published and people have written about folklore and stuff. I love all
Yeah.
that stuff. But I also love to go to places which have a haunted castle or whatever and kind of experience whatever I experience. So my flip side to my question, sorry, I went off on a tangent there, but my flip side to my question is when you do make a video, whatever it might be, torso mystery or whatever, and you've produced it and you've uploaded it, are you always happy with your finished product, or do you think, oh, I could have added this or I could have added that?
I'm never entirely happy with it. Sorry, I did miss one point from your previous question, but I'll go back to this one if
Yeah,
that's all
sorry.
right. You talked about sources, the sources that I go to. Well,
Yes.
my first port of call would be Wikipedia. I mean, people
Okay.
people slate it and say how awful it is, and yes, it's not always a great source, but it's a good starting point for anyone. And once you start looking further than Wikipedia, you can begin to pull out all of the nonsense. You can work out what happened and what didn't. You can take out the facts. You can work out the facts and the fiction. And another place that I go to immediately after that is the British News Archive, which is a paid
Yeah.
subscription, and you can pull up millions of
Yeah.
pages of newspaper articles from the last 300 years. And also there's a New York Times, which is also a paid subscription as well. Those news archives, that they're a goldmine really of information and stories. And then after that, I will look at books. I'll go to eBay and I'll go to Bookfinder and things like that, and try and find any obscure old books that may cover the subject that I'm covering.
I know it's going to be difficult. You've got a lot of content on your Curious World channel. There's a ton of content on there. But what would be one of your favourite episodes that you've put together that you had most fun doing and were happy with it, the finished product?
Yeah, the one that like I said, I'm never entirely happy, but the one that I had the most fun with, and the one that I'm most happy with, is the Dark Tales from Wisconsin video. It was my first 30-minute plus video, I think, that I did. I think it came out at 40 minutes or something like that. That wasn't a reason that I liked it, because I didn't force it. I didn't make it that long, but it got to the point where it's like, I can't really condense it anymore. I don't like to condense information too much, because then you end up missing vital parts of the story, which I think is really important. And I think one of the things that a lot of YouTubers do is they try to condense all of the information to get the stuff out as quickly as they can. It's not about conveying information, it's about as much monetization as they can get. So I try not to condense it too much. But yeah, the Wisconsin Tales was a really interesting one. People say to me, well, why did you do Wisconsin? Of all the places in the world, of all the states, why did you pick that one? Well, I have a friend of mine called Todd Sheedlow from Wisconsin, and he sent me a documentary called The Wisconsin Death Trip. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's a very good documentary. It's about a very small area of Wisconsin. It's not about the state as a whole, but it just tells stories from its history, dark stories from its history, and I really loved the documentary, and it just went from there. And then he also sent me a book called Weird Wisconsin as well, which was a great source of information. So really, that video came from those two sources that were sent to me from the state.
That's interesting. I mean, that kind of level of research is you touched on something there about other channels that will just condense stuff to do it kind of a bulletin. There's your
Yeah,
story, and thank you and good night. That's good if you're looking for something that you just need to get a little bit of a feel for. It can also be damaging because if you don't get all the information, and then you start to think, well, I know everything about it now. I watched this 10-minute video and I don't need to know anything more. And there could be so much more that you're missing out on, which would make the
yeah,
story even more interesting. It's kind of the way that YouTube is now, and I understand why producers do that. It's because they want to work to the algorithm. That's the way it is now. But it's nice when you do get a show and it's 30 minutes long and you think, well, I've put all the information in there and I don't want to take anything more away. I've stripped away all I can. You've got the full story, and it's more of a, I would say that with 30 minutes long, that's more of a mini documentary rather than a short video. That's you're in the realms of documentary
yeah,
sort of length there. So yeah, I say that anything that has got good quality information in it will never be boring. It will people if you get bored of it, then you can always come back and watch it later. My other side of it is I know that you've got lots and lots of videos that you've done for Curious World, but you've had another channel pop up. You've got the
yes.
Phantom Chronicles. So you've got two different projects here. Is there a reason?
Yes, there is. It's something that I've thought about doing now for a couple of years, but I never went through with it because I thought, well, can I really do two channels justice? I didn't want to do a second channel and just have it as a sleeper channel and, put out, say, 2 or 3 videos a year. I wanted to give it the same amount of attention, but I just didn't think that I had the time to do it. And also, as time went on with the Curious World channel, I noticed that every time I would upload a story about, say, the paranormal, well, one, I would hemorrhage subscribers, and 2, I would get a lot, as much as a lot of people loved it, and I got a lot of very positive feedback, and I always did whenever I uploaded a ghost story video. But I also got a lot of comments that said, I don't like this nonsense. Why do you cover this BS? Stick to the true crime, stick to facts, stick to history. Likewise, I would then do a true crime video and I would, again, lose a lot of subscribers. Obviously, the people who didn't like the true crime, who liked the paranormal stuff. And I would get comments, again, mostly very good, positive ones, but I'd also get comments saying, well, I don't like this stuff. I like the paranormal stuff. Why don't you do more paranormal stuff? So I thought, well, it got to the point in the end where I thought, well, I've really got to split it. And I know people say that, well, you can't please everybody, and you can't. But I wanted to make a bloody good go at it. So that's why I split it. And now I've got the true crime / grim histories / what lies beneath, as I like to call it, because I do the series of the unearthed videos, when nature unearths the dead, which I am, which is a really popular series actually, and I am planning on doing a 5th one this year or in the next couple of months. But yeah, I decided to keep them separate.
So with the Phantom Chronicles being that the paranormal sort of area, how often do you sort of make videos for that? Is it do you every few months do you make a small mini documentary or a video for it, or is it just as and when you see a story to think, oh, that'll work, I can work something with that? How does that work? How do you feed the channels?
Well, I do have a to-do list for both channels, for the Curious World channel and for the Paranormal channel. I have a 2022 list, and I say, right, for the Curious World,
one of those. I've got one of those,
and they never work out exactly as you want them to, do they? But I thought, right, these are the videos I want to make for 2022 for Curious World, and these are the videos I want to make for Paranormal, for Phantom Chronicles, sorry. And I've got a long list of videos that I want to do, and I will try to put them out every 4 to 6 weeks. It doesn't always work out, but so far I've done really well, actually, because I started Phantom Chronicles in October. It was Halloween, I launched it. And I've just put out my 4th video since Halloween. Now, for me, that's good. That's a good work rate. For a lot of YouTubers, it wouldn't be, because a lot of them put out a video a week. But for me, it's good. So I'm not letting anyone down so far.
Well, I think that as long as you're producing content that people enjoy and that you feel that you've done the best possible job possible, and that's all that matters. I mean, but if you want to put out a video every week or every 3 days or whatever you choose to do, and you've got the facilities and the time to do it, then that's great. Go for it.
You know, I'm married and I have children as well. So that obviously takes up a lot of my time. And if I was a single man living on my own, I would have a lot. I'm sure I'd have a lot more videos and a lot more subscribers by now. But that is not how life is.
Okay, so we've established that you've got two YouTube channels and you like things, you like the gruesome side of it and you like the paranormal side of it. Let's go into the realms of the real world, and I want to pick your brains about has the paranormal ever come knocking on your door?
Well, this is a funny one because I am a skeptic, and I have always been a skeptic. I've always been very interested in the paranormal ever since a very young age. I remember when I was very little, and I'm looking at the book right now. My father bought me Ghosts of Somerset by Peter Underwood.
Oh, love Peter Underwood.
Yeah.
I got all his books.
Yeah.
Love all of his
Well, I'm
stuff.
still collecting. I'm still trying to get them. I found an absolute beauty the other day in a second-hand shop. It was the Ghost Hunters.
Ghost Hunters. Let me just my highly recommended Nights in Haunted Houses.
Right.
I'll love
get
it.
I'll get it. But yeah, I picked up the Ghost Hunters in the Oval for 50p.
Oh, bargain.
Yeah, it was great.
Bargain.
And I think I got some material out of it as well. I think there are a couple of stories I pulled from that book as well, from sources. But where was I? Oh yes, I was talking about the paranormal experiences I had. Well,
Yes.
nothing ever happened to me that until 2008. In 2008, something happened to me that really stuck with me, and it was just a really strange experience. And at first I thought, oh well, that's a bit weird. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just somebody sat there. It was fine. Just forget about it. But I couldn't forget about it. Anyway, I'll start from the beginning. Back in August of 2008, I was in the process of moving from Cardiff, South Wales, to Bournemouth. And because I'd been offered a job in Bournemouth, and I'd lived in Bournemouth previously, and I'd wanted to get back there because I had this sort of love affair with Cardiff that didn't really work out, failed relationships and the rest of it. So I thought it was time to move. And in August I moved, and I made 3 trips with all of my stuff. And the last trip I made, I needed a big van because it was all the big stuff I needed to move, like my sofa and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And my uncle said, well, a friend of mine's got a van. I can borrow his van. I'll pick you up after work, and then we can go to Cardiff and we can bring the rest of your stuff down. And I thought, great, okay. He didn't turn up at my house until probably nearly 7 o'clock at night. So it was a late one for us. So we didn't get up to Cardiff nearly 10 o'clock. And by the time we'd filled the van up and everything, it was gone midnight. So it was a very late night. And we made our way back, and I think it's the M27 off the top of my head. Is it the M27 that runs through past sort of Southampton way, past Totton, and down towards Bournemouth way.
Right. Okay. I know where you are. I know the area that you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were driving down the M27. I hope I've got that right. Anyway, there was a flyover, and it was. And this might sound like I'm making this up, but this is it was 3 o'clock in the morning. It was 3 a.m. Right. And I know that people use 3 a.m. and say, oh, yes,
the witching hour.
This is the witching hour. This is when the weird stuff happens. But it was 3 o'clock in the morning, I promise you. And we were just approaching this flyover and to a bridge for any Americans who might not know what that is. And we both looked up. There was nobody else on the road because it was 3 o'clock. It was just us. And we both looked up, and we saw this very quite clearly in the headlights. We saw a lady in a white gown or in a white dress, or dressed in white anyway. But then again, it could have just looked white because of obviously the reflection of the lights in the dark. Everything looks the same, doesn't it? But anyway, she was perched on the edge of the flyover looking down.
Like she was going to jump off.
this it bothers me really because, and I might get some hate for this, but we kept going.
Those kind of okay. I just want to
Yeah,
interject here. There are moments in your life where things happen, and you think you always, what
yeah,
if? Go back. What if? Though that moment happened, and you might not even thought about it, just carried on like,
yeah,
oh, that was weird. Did I
yeah,
imagine that? And you can think those things over in your head a million times. So it's those moments, and we've all experienced them. But seeing someone on a bridge at 3 o'clock in the morning is going to make you think, what's going on there?
we did. Well, I mean, really, what we should have done if it was to happen now, I would have just called the police and said, "Look, there's somebody on the bridge. I think they're going to kill themselves." But we kept going, and my uncle turned to me and he said, "Did you see that?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "There was a lady on the bridge." I said, "Oh, that's weird. Oh, how strange, this time of the morning." And we just kept going, and we didn't really think too much about it. But then couple of miles down the road, my uncle turned to me and he said, "Maybe it was a ghost." It hadn't actually occurred to me at that point. He said, "Oh, maybe it was a ghost," and I was like, "Nah, yeah, that's funny. That'd be silly. Yeah, that's a good story." But then I kept thinking about it, and by the time we got back home, back to Bournemouth, it was approaching 4 o'clock in the morning. Now I had to work the next day at 9 o'clock,
Right.
so I wasn't getting much sleep at all. So I thought, right, I need to go home and I need to go to sleep. Anyway, when I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't sleep. So what I did, I sat down on my computer and I googled some keywords. I put M27, flyover, bridge, girl, suicide,
All right. So you were trying to. All right. Okay. All right. Yep.
and the story that popped up, I can honestly say I've never, and there was a picture as well of the young lady involved. I've never had the hairs on the back of my neck stand up before.
I think I know where this is going. This is getting good.
I've never had this happen to me until this moment. That the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and on the top of my head stood up, and I could feel it with so much force pushed up because the girl that I was looking at on the website,
It,
I'm 90% sure it was the girl that I saw on the bridge.
I want to hear the rest of the account of what you found. I'm
Yeah,
itching.
yeah, and I know that, like I said, I'm a skeptic. I still am a skeptic, but this is something that I haven't been able to forget, and something that I haven't been able to get out of my head. So I looked into it, and I don't want to name the young lady.
No, no,
Um,
no.
I
Just
mean, the information is out there, obviously, but I don't want to name the young lady because it was a horrible story. She had been abused, sexually abused, and nobody believed her story. So she threw herself off the bridge early hours of the morning in 2007, which was the year before.
so 1 year
It wasn't
before.
exactly to the day. It was approximately a year before. I think it was June or July 2007. She had committed suicide, thrown herself off of the bridge.
The person that you thought you saw was the resemblance of.
I'm almost completely sure.
Wow.
That the hair was the same. Her facial features were very similar. The hair length was, she had dark hair. It was shoulder
Yeah.
length. It just looked like her.
Interesting as well that people that say that they see ghosts or apparitions, that when they see them, they say they just look like a normal person.
Yeah.
They just look like a normal solid person. They weren't all wispy or
No.
cloudy or anything. They just looked like an actual normal person that you could go over and
Yeah.
touch.
Yeah. But there is a second part to this story, which I found even
Ah,
even stranger. And again, this is another reason why I haven't been able to forget it. I hadn't mentioned the story to anybody because I don't know a lot of people who would even entertain it, even as just an interesting story. So I kept it to myself. A couple of months later, my mother came to Bournemouth because she was working in Poole. She was working at the hospital in Poole, and she had a contract to work for a few days or for a couple of weeks even. So she came to live with me for that duration, so that she didn't have so far to go. And we got talking, and the conversation turned to ghosts and strange occurrences that we'd had. And my mum claims to have seen several throughout her
Right.
life, but the story came around to what I'd experienced. And she listened to me. She didn't really make any comment. And then after I told her the story, she said, "Do you remember last year when I came to stay with you in Cardiff?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "You know what? I had to leave very, very early in the morning because I had to go to work. So I had to leave really early." She said, "Do you remember that day?" I was like, "Yeah, I think I remember that day. I remember something that, you had to get up at stupid o'clock in the morning." And she said, "Well,
Right.
as I was coming into Bournemouth, I was going down the M27, coming into Bournemouth. There was a police blockade. The police had just blocked the road, and the cars had just started to pile up. It's not pile up. Sorry, there wasn't a traffic.
Traffic
Yeah,
jam. Yeah.
it was a
Traffic
jam.
jam.
The jam
Yeah.
started to pile up. She was very close to the front of it, and she thought, "Oh, this is a bit of an inconvenience." So that they were redirected, and she had to turn around and find an alternative route. But later that day, she'd heard on the radio that a young lady had thrown herself off of the flyover,
Wow.
and it,
So
it was the same. It was the same flyover. So my mother was there when it occurred.
places, hauntings, suicides, emotions. It goes back to the emotional connection, the moment of you leave this world, and if you go to wherever, is there an emotional connection? Did you that night? Could you have possibly witnessed something that happened months earlier, and yet your mother is connected as
Yeah.
well because she experienced that event just after it happened? It just all those that
Was
kind
there
of
some
connection
sort
is
of connect, like you say, an emotional
yeah.
connection between myself and my mother because she was there when it happened? Yeah, absolutely. And I had thought of that myself.
It is. I find accounts like this interesting because of more than one person involved. Not only did you see it, was it your uncle was
Yes, my
driving
uncle was driving.
the
Yeah.
van? He saw it as well. So both of you saw whatever it
Yeah.
was.
Yes, my mother's brother. Yeah.
Yeah, and then your mum witnesses as at the event previously before it had happened. And when you think of the planet that we're on, and we're so deep into our everyday lives that we walk down this kind of corridor of life, and we get up, we go to work, we come home, we have our dinner, we watch a bit of TV, we go to bed, and we have a hobby we occasionally do. But we are on that kind of path, that linear path of, and when something like this happens, it kind of kicks you off the
Yeah.
rails a little bit, and it sort of makes
Yeah.
you think, hang on a minute, what what's going
Yeah.
on here? This isn't this seems a bit
Mm.
odd. And I think when anyone, as I say, once again, it is always good to question anything like that. You must question it. You can't just go ahead and go, oh, well, it was this and it was that and it all happened and it was true and it was fine. It's good to question it because once you start to question it, it makes you look deeper into why it possibly happened, if it happened, how it happened, and what it might have been. And that goes for all, I think, paranormal cases and the UFOs and stuff. But that really, with your mum seeing it as well, that's like the icing on the cake there.
That's what I thought. And as a skeptic, that's what really bothers me because I don't
Yeah,
think unless I saw something that was 100% that I thought considered 100% proof, I would not. I can't be a believer 100%. I just can't because I find it so
no.
difficult to comprehend. Even though I've experienced that, I still have a level of disbelief. But yes, when you say icing on the cake, that really was the thing that made me think, oh my God, maybe there is something more.
Since then, have you found, since having that experience, have you found that you've had other experiences after that, that maybe that was a catalyst to other things in your life that maybe have happened that you thought, well, that was a bit strange?
I don't know about catalyst. I never saw it as a catalyst, but I did. I had a couple of experiences a few years later. It's not something that happened anytime soon afterwards. I think it was 2014. I'd moved to Weymouth. I moved around quite a bit. I moved from
Hmm.
place to place for a while before I settled down. I moved to Weymouth because from Bournemouth because I decided that I wanted to be closer to the sea. The people, the company that I worked for, allowed me to do it because they were happy for me to work from home at the time. So I thought, oh, why not just go and live by the sea, because it was quieter in Weymouth as well. It was more pleasant. So I lived on the seafront in a flat on the seafront. The Gloucester Lodge. I'll tell you what. Yeah, it was the Gloucester Lodge, which was a former hotel owned by royalty. I cannot remember now which.
So it had history.
Yes,
It
I
was
can't
a,
remember which
yeah.
monarch owned it. It goes back many many years, and I just moved in, and I was sort of led out on the sofa, and I went through a stage of watching episodes of The Twilight Zone. And this is how I sort of
Yes.
spent my evenings. Because I'd moved to a new place. I didn't have many friends at the time there because I didn't know anybody, and I was just about drifting off. I was between consciousness and sleep, somewhere in between, and I saw in the corner of the room there's a chair. Now,
Right.
from that chair, I saw a what I thought was what looked like a male human form. Now, I don't know why I thought it was male because there was no detail to let me know that it
Okay.
was male, but I felt very much that it was male. It got up from the chair and it walked across the room, past me, past the television, past myself, towards the doorway that led out into the hallway. And I sort of snapped out of my daze, and I thought, my God, what was that? And I thought, and because I was half asleep, I thought, oh, obviously I was just dreaming. It was just a strange dream
Yeah.
that I had, and I touched on before with you before we started recording that it's that something a story like that for people who don't believe is very easy to
Dismiss.
dismiss
Yeah.
because they think, oh well,
Yeah.
you were clearly asleep, you were clearly dreaming, you just didn't realize that you were, and I understand it, I get it, but a couple of weeks later, I was led in bed, and I was just about drifting off. The light in the hallway was on, and I was just sort of drifting off to sleep again. And what I believe was the same entity, male entity, walked into the open door, into the room, up to the side of the bed, crouched down, as if they were going to look into the sideboard, to the side table.
Like the little
Yeah,
cabinet
there's
at
a
the side
little
of the
cabinet
bed.
on the
Yeah.
side
Yeah.
of the bed, and this sort of figure moved to the cabinet as if they were sort of reaching down to open it. And again, I snapped out of this daze that I was in, and I thought to myself, "Oh, that was really strange. I've witnessed that before. That's not the first time that has happened. That was the same experience that I'd had before, but two different parts of the building."
So, do you think that possibly what you were witnessing was something that had happened
Yes,
previously, a long
yeah,
time
I
ago?
do because
An imprint?
possibly, like you said, it was what do they call it? The stone tape theory.
Stone
I,
tape,
I,
yeah.
I like the stone tape theory. I think that's the most plausible explanation as far as I'm concerned. Uh,
I think with buildings, I love history. I love history. I couldn't live in London, but London's history fascinates
Absolutely,
me. The history of London,
it's
absolutely, because
absolutely
all of the,
steeped.
yeah, John Rogers, he's a YouTuber. He walks around London. He every week he tells a different story of a different place, and I watch his videos religiously. Jules Guides, he walks around London, tells all these tales, and they're
Yeah.
fascinating. And when you go to a city, especially with our country, England has got a lot of history. All of Europe has got a lot of history, but with England, it's got a lot of history. It goes back many, 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 many years, and I think that when we look at tales like and older buildings that have got history, and you have these experiences, it is good to be skeptical. It is good to sort of think, well, what am I experiencing
Yeah.
here? But it's interesting that us as humans, I have this belief, and it's not my theory. It's a theory that's been around for a long time. It's similar to the stone tape. Is that we are basically walking antennas, and we are able to, under the right conditions, tune in to past events. And I don't want to make it sound like I don't want to go into the realms of mediumship or clairvoyance, because I think that is a completely different topic, or it's a different conversation for a different time. I think that we're all, every single person, and more so when you're a child, but as you get older, you tend to not lose the ability, but the ability is put to the back part of your mind. You don't need it. But when you're a child, you have the imaginary friends, and you have all those kind of things. Children that seem to be more sensitive to things. They can tell when things aren't right. And when you get older, you still have those abilities, but they're not as to the
Yeah.
forefront. I think that we're all in some way, like we were talking earlier about, when you're in a very, very, very relaxed, calm, clear state, that there is a possibility that we might be tuning into something where, for example, you're in a relaxed state. As I say, you're relaxed. You're watching the telly or whatever, and then you don't actually see the event, but you see it within your mind.
Yes.
And it's more of a mental thing. And okay, we can touch on clairvoyance a little bit, where some mediums and clairvoyants, they have mental imprints. They don't see things. They see that within their mind. They have pictures. They have events and emotions and feelings, and that's how they convey what they're feeling. And obviously, that, I say, that's a massive can of worms for another day. But
Yeah.
I think that we are in some way able to tune into. I'm sure that you have had it, where you go into a building, and you can, not only do you smell the history, because these older buildings, they do have a particularly strange smell to them.
Yes.
Maybe I'm weird, but that's just me.
No,
I've
they
picked up
do.
on that.
Absolutely, they do.
But they also have a strange feeling. Do you not agree?
Yes. I can't really explain it, because I don't have any. I don't think that I have any sort of extra sense to pick out these things. I don't. I wouldn't say that I walk into an old building and feel that there's something there. I don't feel that there are other things there. I'm not like maybe a clairvoyant would, but I do know what you mean. But
Yeah.
it's it's very difficult to explain. I can't explain. I'm not doing a very good job here.
Well, I think what we can agree on is that there are times in an individual's experience of life where you can experience something and you can think that is not really normal. That it's not meant to be, as in the sense that the way that we understand how reality works, like we talk about the stone tape, you can have an experience and see something and you think, what's going on there? Why am I seeing the same thing? As if, for example, if you'd have say you would have imagined a person that was in your room that got up out of the chair and walked. What is the catalyst behind you seeing that? Did you see that person? Is your mind made that up? And then once again, you see the same person in your mind come into your room and go down to the bedside cabinet and
Yes.
to get some. Why is it the same person? There's all those questions to ask.
Yes, that was the thing that made me think, or maybe there's something in this, because I don't know why I felt that it was the same entity, but I just knew that it was, even though I couldn't actually see.
Does it motivate you to investigate or to go into a place that is known to have paranormal activity to want to experience, or are you happy to sort of leave that to the people that want to go for the better use of a better word, ghost hunting?
No, I would leave. I have gone on a ghost hunting, an arranged, paid for tourist trap ghost hunting thing up north. I went in Manchester
Okay.
once that really came to nothing. But because I don't really know anything about the equipment, all of the equipment that they use to pick up the EVPs and the rest of it. I
Yeah.
don't know anything about it. I'm completely ignorant to it. So I do tend to leave that to the people who know what they're doing. I would quite happily though join somebody who knew what they were doing and kind of just go along for the ride. I would love to do that again.
I think I mention it every. My listeners are going to get sick of me because every time I talk to someone, I mention it. I mentioned this to a previous fellow guest I had on, but one of my dreams is to. Every year I say unfortunately, because of everything that's been going on in the world in the last couple of years, that's been put to the back burner. But one of my dreams is to rent a very old house in the country, away from people, get a group of people together which are all like-minded, but all have different thoughts and ideas on what the paranormal is.
Yeah.
For a weekend, like a long weekend, and say, right, we're not going to go with all these meters and everything. All we're going to have is maybe a recorder, a notebook, and a camera, and everyone is going to have their own experience, and whatever you experience is you document it, and at the end of it, we all sit down and we say, right, let's see what we've got and see if we can build up a picture here. Because I think that everyone, in a way, experiences the paranormal in their own way. And it has a lot to do with our upbringing. If you're in a highly religious family and your upbringing is of a religious nature, then I think with the paranormal, your experience of it is going to be slightly different. If you're in a family that has no interest in it, and you're brought up and you don't know what it is, you're going to get your ideas from the telly, from horror films, from spooky films on the telly, from kids' TV or whatever. So yeah, I think that it would be good to have a group of people together that are like-minded, but also not all thinking the same. Everyone's got their own, a little bit skeptical, a little bit of a believer, a little bit of a medium, or a little bit of a clairvoyant or whatever, and put them all together and say, right, guys, we're all here in this big, allegedly spooky house, which is 800 years old and has had all sorts of things go on in it. Let's see what we experience, and just let it happen. And but I don't. The problem is, you see, when we look at entertainment, and you might feel the same, you might disagree, but I think that there's lots of shows out there. There's lots of ghost shows. There's lots of anyone now can set up a YouTube channel with a camera,
Yeah.
and go ghost hunting. But as you just said, you touched on, a lot of people trying to do it for clicks and views, and that can be that can kind of have a negative effect.
It can be dangerous, can't it? Because that will encourage fakery.
Yeah.
And it does. It absolutely does. I mean, it happened with Most Haunted in the end.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't it? Because that people had started to lose interest, and then they made this episode where they so-called had this 100% proof of a ghost, and it all turned out to be
one of the other presenters walking up the stairs, wasn't it?
Yes, but didn't they? I heard that they manipulated the footage.
It was, well, from what I saw, it was a night. They were doing a night investigation, and they were in a room, and down the hallway there was a set of stairs that went up, and they caught the legs of someone going up the stairs in the distance on a night vision camera. But it really looked really kind of washed out and fuzzy, and it could have been a member of the crew.
It looked like they were wearing jeans
and a pair of like walking shoes.
Yes.
So and also we have a few people that were on the show that left the show because of they disagreed with the way that the show was being run. And I can understand the producers of these shows. It happens with Ghost Hunters and other shows where they say, look, we need stuff to happen. We need
Yeah.
to keep our audience engaged because we need to make that ad revenue. We need to have those advertisers that want to advertise on our show, and we need people to be. We need the figures, and every week, and unfortunately, a lot of these shows they might start out with all the best intentions of the world, and they might go into a room, go into a building, and doing a whole week's investigation, and end up with zilch, with
Yeah.
nothing. Maybe a few ambiguous noises, and what? That's it. That's all we got, guys.
Yeah. The thing is, these things can't happen. They're not going to
No,
happen
no,
on cue, are they?
no.
Like say that it's if they do happen at all, it's very, very few and far between. It's
Hmm.
extremely rare.
Oh yes, that's right. That's you. You can, as I talked to someone else, and we were having a conversation. We got onto the conversation of apparitions, and you could go into an old stately home, and you could see, I don't know, a cavalier walking up the stairs or whatever, and you could be the first person that's seen that apparition in 500 years.
Yeah.
It doesn't have
Yeah.
there's no time schedule to the paranormal happenings, and we do know that something is happening, but we don't really understand what's happening. And we also can't put a time scale on it. And unfortunately, when it comes to the shopping room floor, and things are edited in such a way that when people watch a TV show, it's as if everything's happening every 10 minutes. You're in this crazy house of craziness for 40
Yeah.
minutes, and you, as someone who if you're watching the TV show, you then become, well, something's going to happen next week, something's going to happen next week. And then when you go on a ghost hunt, not you, but, as in an individual goes on a ghost hunt, they go on a ghost hunt, and a real ghost hunt, a vigil, and then nothing happens. And then they think, well, I was a bit cold for half an hour, and that was it. And I ate all my sandwiches.
Yeah. People start to pick out things, don't they? That they think. I think people's imaginations start to run wild if they're not seeing what they want to see, or that they were hoping that they would see. It's interesting that Peter Underwood, obviously, the very famous, well, I mentioned it before, famous author and paranormal investigator, said that he had never witnessed a ghost. He'd never seen a manifestation in all of his years,
Mm-hmm.
which I've got so much respect for that, and this is why I respect Peter Underwood so much. Is because after all of those years of dedication to the craft, he came back and said, "Yeah, I've never seen a ghost."
Well, perfectly.
Sorry.
You bring on you couldn't have brought it on better, because not saying that, yeah, that's true. He'd heard a lot of things. He'd been in houses and experienced
Yes.
anomalous sounds. I remember there was a story of him doing a research of a manor house, and he heard what
Yeah.
he believed to be a horse in the
I
house
see.
going up the stairs. And he did the research of the history, and there was a time in the house, the building's history, where one of the owners used to ride his horse into the house, and it happened. It was an event that happened in previous history.
Yeah.
So you're completely right. He always approached everything very skeptically, so saying, "Well, let's look at this from all areas."
Yeah.
And that's what drags me into his books. That's why I like to read his books, because they are not just saying, "Oh, it's just a ghost. It's definitely a ghost." It's like, well, what could this be? And I think that
Yep.
if you're coming from that angle, it's fascinating. But on the subject of ghost, I wanna look up in the sky and say UFOs, because I want to know if you've seen any odd things in the night sky.
No, I haven't. I've never experienced anything of that nature before, although I do find it interesting.
What's your take on it? What's your take on are we being visited? Is planet Earth got secret bases? What's your take on that?
Oh God. I, I don't think that it's beyond the realms of possibility that we have been visited, and that we have been visited from other planets. I think it's possible. I mean, there are obviously, as you'll know, countless accounts of people who have witnessed this. sort of thing, and some of them are really, really quite intriguing. I mean, I don't know if you've ever read Martin Caden's Ghosts of the Air,
No, not read that one.
but that's a very good book that covers accounts from what the author claims to be very respected individuals who have given their accounts on all kinds of things that they've seen. But yes, it's interesting, isn't it? And you could say that the old adage that well, we are one of billions of
Yeah.
planets. So who's to say there isn't one just like ours, or more advanced than ours, or not as advanced as ours, out there as well? And there's no reason why they couldn't visit us. So yeah, I think it's possible. It's something that I really need to sort of look into a bit more. I've only ever done one UFO video. I'm not very well versed.
So the plausibility of UFOs, I think, is completely plausible. But I was just saying, life on other planets. You think? I mean, I think that we're here, so why can't they be there?
Yeah,
wherever that might be.
I think it's highly likely.
What about Mars? Mars has been in the news recently for its, the landers and stuff. And I'm as any of my listeners will tell you, I do have a little bit of a interest in Mars and its anomalies. All of those pictures that come back, some of them look a bit weird. Have you had any interest in Mars? Does that kind of interest you, that kind of side of things, with the past civilizations?
I do find it really interesting, yeah, and I have seen some very like anybody else has some really interesting sort of images that people claim to be genuine from Mars. It's something I am interested in, yeah.
As we're going to kind of in our wrap up segment now, in 2022, where do you see Curious World, the Phantom Chronicles, of what's its kind of goal?
Well, I just want to keep going as I am, put out the best videos that I possibly can without too much of a space in between. Sorry, I've just knocked my microphone. I'm in production hell at the moment with about 3 different projects.
Oh.
And it's driving me mad, because there's one project. This is interesting, and this is driving me crazy. There's one project that I began 18 months ago.
Right.
And I still haven't finished it, and I'm determined to finish it because 2 months ago I found out that Netflix are doing a 4-part series.
Oh, you got to be quick there.
And I've got to be quick, because if I put it out after Netflix, people are just going to say that I copied Netflix.
Yeah.
And it's going to and obviously they're going to do a better job. I'm a big fan of the Netflix documentaries. I mean, I know they get a lot of hate from independent filmmakers, and I understand that, but they do put out quality content. They really do. And I really want to get this video out there before that comes about. The thing that really bothers me, I don't know how long it's going to take me. It could take me another 2 to 3 months to do it. But once that's out of the way, I can then start again on my other videos that I want to do. Like I said, I want to do another When Nature Unearths the Dead video. I want to do another Dark Tales from the Thames video. I've already got the stories lined up for that one, and I'm really looking forward to getting into that. And I want to do another Dark Tales from another US state. Give something else back to all the lovely American subscribers that I have, that people that show me so much support.
So you're it strikes me that the darker side, the sort of the darker tales, very similar to, I'm sure you're familiar with Shrouded Hand.
Oh yes.
So Tom, we've had Tom on Paratalk.
Oh, I see.
He's a really nice guy, and he's got some crazy stories. He told us some really interesting stuff. But yeah, so I think that your kind of your stuff is very similar to that. It's sort of kind of got that dark kind of edge to it. It's and that's what I think is interesting. But you come from a slightly different angle, because you try and look at the flip side of the stories and look beyond its normal story to say, well, is there more to this?
Yeah.
I can only see that your channel's getting more and more interesting. I can only see that the story's becoming more and more head scratching. But as I say, that unfortunately, when you do channels of this nature, and they take so much effort to put together, and it's such a task because, as you say, you've got to do all your research, you've got to do all your B-roll, you've got to do all your recording, you've got to do all your editing, and it's an incredible. I mean, I run a simple podcast, and it takes enough work. Lord knows how much longer it would take me if I started to work with video as well.
Yeah, it is a very long process, and it is frustrating, especially if you're talking about something that there's not really anything apart from writing.
Yeah.
On record. You have there's no video, there's no images. It's very, very difficult to portray that, and that is one sort of problem that I've come up against many, many times. And what I don't like to do is to use images and visuals that are completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
To what is happening. For example, if I was talking about something that happened in 1720 something, and then I showed a city with cars driving up and down the highway, it just doesn't make sense. Even it might be the right location, but if it isn't of the time, it makes no sense to me. I really do struggle sometimes with that. But one other thing, sorry, you were talking about what's going to happen going forward.
Yes.
I've always had an issue with my audio. I mean, a lot of people say that my audio is fine. I personally know that it can be improved, and it was just lack of finances that I haven't been able to get a really, really good audio setup. That's something I want to do this year, and something that I've started to put money into already. I just need to buy the big expensive microphone and to set that up.
All right. Okay. Well, it sounds like you've got your plate is full for this year. As I say, it's we've all got our lists. I've got one as well. How much of that list I will get done, I have no idea. But I've got some good ideas and projects to be moving forward with. And as I say, these episodes are to. I like to network. I like to bring other people in, and I like to network with people, and I like to hear to get their feedback and hear their stories. And I think that if you can do that and you can create a small community of people that are like-minded, it's all about working together, and it's all about sort of helping each other grow by working in different areas, and it's just a nice thing. It's just a positive thing, creating that positive environment. But that's just me being all weird. But anyway, so this is the end now. We've come to the end. It's been absolutely brilliant. Loads of interesting information. I hope you've all listened, that were listening intently, because I was. Remember Paratalk, paratalkpodcast.com. All the links to Curious Will's information and his websites is going to be on the show notes. So if you want to, I would highly advise you go there and you listen to and watch every video. Take it easy, and I'll speak to you soon.